Welcome to Those Were the Days. I'm the library archivist Nancy Martin. Today we'll be talking about the Village of Hackett, a topic that was suggested by some of our participants. In case there's someone joining us today who doesn't know where the Village of Hackett is located in Peters Township, I thought I'd include both a zoomed out and a zoomed in map of the village's location. The red dotted line seen here on this map is the boundary line for Peters Township. The village of Hackett is located in the southeast corner of the township and abuts Nottingham and Union townships. Hackett is located between Venetia and Finleyville. In this zoomed in image, you can see the Finleyville Cemetery, the large green space at the top right, and beside it, the streets comprising the village of Hackett. Here's a current view of the village from Google Earth. You can see that up above Hackett, there's a new housing plan under construction. The earliest references to Hackett that I found in newspapers from the late 1800s and early 1900s referred to the town as Hackett Station and described it as a small village on the Baltimore and Ohio, or B&O, Railroad. Tony Mickick, brother of Tom and owner of the Lighthouse Electric Company, had this sign erected on Venetia Road in order to highlight Hackett's existence to travelers. One side of the sign reads, "Entering the Village of Hackett," and the other side, "Leaving the Village of Hackett." The sign records that the village was a coal mining community founded by Thomas Hackett in 1835. When I asked Mary Ann Mickick what she thought was important for people to know about Hackett, she mentioned to me how many of the village's inhabitants were extremely hard workers. Her own husband Tom started working in a butcher shop in Finleyville at the age of 12. In addition to businessman Tony Mickick and others, another example of a hardworking Hackett boy was John William Telbin Jr., who lived from 1883 until 1950. John Jr. was a coal miner who, in 1909, started studying at Ohio Northern University. He put himself through school working odd jobs and earned both a commerce and a law degree. Telbin went on to work for more than 35 years for the Land Title Guarantee and Trust Company and the Cuyahoga Title and Abstract Company of Cleveland. In June of 1914, the Monongahela Daily Herald, for which John both solicited and reported while putting himself through college, cheered, quote, "Here's to John Telbin, the coal miner, the aggressive student, the honored graduate of Northern, the prospective lawyer. May the fruits of his industry, nobility of character, and high purpose in life bring him the daily blessings that the worthy only enjoy." Hackett owes its existence to coal mining. Here we have a map from the 1930s showing the location of the Hackett mine circled in red. According to her family history entitled Wrights on the Move by Sandra Wright Kennedy, the Hackett mine, opened by Thomas Hackett, was later owned and operated by the Boyle Brothers Company before being purchased by the Pennsylvania Mining, later Pittsburgh Coal Company, in 1900. The Hackett mine, seen here highlighted in yellow, was not the only mine in the area. The Anderson Mine Number 1 at Venetia, and seen here at the bottom far left of the map, was in operation by 1881. It was owned and operated by local physician Dr. David M. Anderson. The Eclipse Mine, also known as the Anderson Mine Number 2, was located between the Anderson and Hackett mines. I'd also like to draw your attention to the green circle on the map. It highlights the location of the Germania mine. I don't know how many of you remember in our discussions about schools a few months back, we talked about an article from the 1900 newspaper that made mention of the Germania School. And I'm wondering if this is where it was located, perhaps to serve the children of the area school miners. Hackett was not a wealthy village. In fact, a number of women and children were killed by Baltimore and Ohio trains while gathering coal from the tracks in Hackett with which to heat their homes. This 1907 article describes the deaths of Mary Ignatz and Rosa Vannens, who were killed while gathering coal to keep their small children warm. The final lines of the article state, quote, "The bodies of both women were hurled some distance, and their death was almost instantaneous. Mrs. Vannens was badly crushed about the head." I find that pretty heartbreaking. And train accidents weren't the only hazard in Hackett. In 1906, six miners' houses were destroyed by fire at Hackett Station. According to this article from the Canonsburg newspaper, The Daily Notes, the fire spread quickly and the houses were all destroyed in less than an hour. It reported that many of the inmates were unable to carry anything from their houses but for the clothes they wore. It does appear, however, that the mining families looked out for one another. The article ends by informing its readers that most of the families have secured temporary shelter with neighbors. And the miners weren't the only ones whose lives were at risk. Mine bosses were sometimes targeted by disgruntled workers. Such was the case in 1928 when a dynamite bomb exploded close to the house of Tom Bacchus, assistant mine boss at the Eclipse mine. The blast blew the porch off his house and two of his children from their beds. Apparently, the Eclipse mine had been shut down since April of 1927 and was about to reopen as a non union operation. Being a coal mining community, Hackett had a company store known as the Hackett Coal Company Store. In 1893, the store was robbed by three men who tied up the store watchman and tortured him by applying a hot poker to his bare feet in an attempt to extract from him the combination to the store's safe. When the men realized that the man didn't know the combination, they proceeded to break into the safe using a combination of tools and explosives. After they'd emptied the store's safe and its cash drawer, they helped themselves to new clothes, hats, and shoes from the store's inventory, ate a meal, and smoked cigars before leaving. The watchman was discovered by another store employee at around 5 a.m. on the Friday morning. Hackett, because it was a mining community, suffered losses as a result of the mines. On Wednesday, April 23rd, 1913, the Cincinnati mine in Union Township exploded, leaving 96 men dead, including at least two from Hackett. The Daily Notes newspaper out of Canonsburg reported that among the identified dead were John Keseruskis from Russia, age 22, who was a loader in the mine, and Louis Vernosky, a 37-year-old Austrian who was also a loader. Louis left behind a wife and 10 children. Historically, Hackett was inhabited largely by Slovenian immigrants who spoke the Slovene language. Many of them anglicized their names after moving to the U.S. Aloysius School, Skul, Dutch School's paternal grandfather, for example, became Louis School, School. This map of Europe shows the location of Slovenia, circled in red. The Slovenian community socialized at the Hackett Educational and Entertaining Slovenian Club. This is a blank membership card for the club. The Hackett Slovenian Club still exists today. According to its Facebook page, it is, quote, a members only social club with a banquet hall that can be rented out by the public. I had to give myself a geography lesson recently in an attempt to understand some records I came across in the archives. The countries of Slovenia and Slovakia, shown here on this map, share a Slavic language heritage, a predominantly Catholic tradition, and membership in the Austro-Hungarian Empire pre-1918. Between the two countries lie Austria and Hungary. The official language of Slovakia is Slovak, which is part of the Western Slavic languages. The official language of Slovenia is Slovene, which is part of the Southern Slavic languages. I'm explaining all of this because what confuses me about it is that Hackett Club is a Slovenian club, but some of the records it had in its possession and transferred to the archives are Slovakian. Here's a little background about the Slovakian records in the archives. On February 15th, 1890, the National Slavonic Society of the United States, renamed the National Slovak Society of the United States of America in 1913, was founded in Allegheny City, now Pittsburgh's north side. The Slavonic Society was to be one where, quote, all Slovaks of whatever religious faith, occupation, gender, or locale could gather together for their greater good. An initial pool of $200 was collected by the delegates for a death benefit fund. The society was a fraternal benefit society, also called a mutual aid society, that provided mutual financial assistance to its members. Such societies provided key social welfare protections before government welfare programs existed and were foundational to modern insurance. Fraternal benefit societies are usually organized around some form of common values, such as language or religion. The records that were donated to the archives by the Slovenian Club consist mainly of monthly statements of Assembly Number 153 of the National Slavonic Society from 1910 to 1914. The records list the name, age, benefit, and monthly dues of each local member of the society and the total dues remitted to the treasurer. Some familiar last names appear on the lists, including Dubb, School, Sopko, Telbin, and Tomko. You can see the society's name change in its letterhead from the National Slavonic Society in 1910 to the National Slovak Society by 1914. The only other records the archives has that it acquired from the Slovenian Club is a file of medical excuse notes written by local doctors. I assume the letters were submitted to the National Slavonic Society in order for injured or ill workers to receive their benefits. This particular note was written by a Dr. Houghton on behalf of Dutch School's paternal uncle, Joseph School, who in 1914 was suffering from congestion of liver and indigestion. The Hackett Slovenian Club wasn't the village's only source of entertainment. During the 1930s, Hackett had its own young men's baseball team, the Hackett Giants Baseball Club. Dutch's father, Valentine School, was the club's treasurer from 1934 to 1935, and Dutch generously donated his dad's records from this time as team treasurer to the archives. Dutch also donated this wonderful scorebook from the 1934 season, recording the games Hackett played against such area teams as Gastonville, Venetia, Coverdale, and Meuse. This Washington Observer article from June of 1934 mentions that the Venetia baseball team had just suffered its first defeat in 10 games against Coverdale, the coal mining community in Bethel Park. It also mentioned that the Venetia team had beaten the Hackett Giants in each of the last 4 games they had played against one another. The upcoming game between the Venetia and Hackett teams was going to be a benefit game for Hackett player Tommy School, Dutch's uncle, who had fractured his leg 2 weeks previously while sliding into second base playing against Gastonville. I checked the Giants scorebook to see who won the upcoming match between Venetia and Hackett. Sadly for the Giants, the team lost 13-7. I have already mentioned John Telbin Jr. John was a member of the large Telbin family that began with his father, John William Telbin Sr. John Sr. was born in Slovenia and immigrated to the U.S. in 1888. By 1900, John Sr. lived in Hackett, was a coal miner, and owned his own home. This is an undated photograph of the Telbin homestead. The house still stands today. According to his granddaughter Rose Marie Telbin Leslie, John William Telbin Sr. ran a general store in Rankintown, seen here in a 1909 photograph. The store was later owned by the Kiefer and Hodgson families. Here we have a later photograph of the same John Telbin General Store with a sign above the door. John's son Charles Telbin opened a garage and store in Hackett with partner Joe Dremel in 1924. Charles bought out Joe in August of 1924, and the business grew into a grocery store, which remained open until Charles's retirement in 1972. Here's a photograph of the Telbin grocery store after the snowstorm of 1950. Hackett had its own one-room schoolhouse. We talked briefly about it in the first part of our schools presentation a couple of months back. Both of the Hackett school photographs seen here were taken in 1923. Rose Telbin, the school's teacher, appears in both photographs. The Hackett School closed in 1926 with the opening of the new Venetia School on Venetia Road. As I already mentioned, the schools are a Hackett family whose records the archives is happy to have in its holdings. We have a beautiful photo album that once belonged to Dutch's mom, Anna Vrovsik's school, and she can be seen here in the first 2 photographs. I did a display and a live from the archives program about the album a couple of months ago. It's just full of wonderful photos from Anna's life from the 1920s until around 1950. The first photo here shows Anna and Valentine the year before their wedding, 1935. The second shows Anna, Dutch, and Valentine circa 1940. And the third and final picture shows a young Dutch with his younger sister Betty Ann circa 1942. On Beverly's advice, I recently spoke with Irene School Holmes, Dutch's cousin, about Hackett. She was able to describe to me the locations of both the original schoolhouse on Venetia Road and the school's brick house at the end of Mervyn Drive. With this information, I was able to go to Google Earth and match photographs from Dutch's mom's photograph album with their real life locations. On the right is a 1932 photograph of Dutch's parents, Valentine and Anna, standing at the corner of a distinctive Insel brick covered house. On the left is the original school family home on Venetia Road, on which the same distinctive Insel brick as in the almost 100-year-old picture can still be seen on the side of the house. And here, the black and white photograph on the bottom right is of a teenage Dutch with his sisters and maternal grandfather Joseph Rovsik outside of the red brick schoolhouse at the end of Mervyn Drive in 1950. When you compare that image with the color photo at the top left, you can see that the same side of the house is shown in both photographs. To conclude today's presentation, I have an image of the reverse side of the Village of Hackett sign that we saw at the beginning of the presentation. Thank you for watching. The next Those Were the Days program will be held on Thursday, August 14th at 11 a.m. We will be discussing Peters Township in the news.